And I've shown you a few documents up here. There's a whole lot more. I could take you through a whole lot of other founding fathers, but you get the idea. On what, and these two guys who wrote this book, they're two professors, Cornell University, PhD guys. You see the picture right there. On what possible basis would they say all the founders were atheists, agnostics, deists? I mean, I've shown you some evidence. What evidence they use? Let's go to the back of the book and look at footnotes. You get the back of the book and look at footnotes, a note on sources. You see right there? Look what our two PhD professors tell us. They say, we have dispensed with the usual scholarly apparatus of footnotes. Well, isn't that convenient? Hey, we're PhDs. You can trust us. We're professionals. We know what we're doing. That's revisionism. That's how it works.
Barton, as usual, got a good laugh from his audience by plucking just those few words from the back of the godless Constitution. But here's what the authors actually say in the back of their book. They say, because we have intended the book to reach a general audience, and also because the material we have cited is for the most part familiar to historians and political scientists, we have dispensed with the usual scholarly apparatus of footnotes. So the authors of this book knew that casual readers weren't going to look up their footnotes even if they did include them, which is certainly true, and that anyone who's already familiar with the subject wouldn't need footnotes to know what they were citing. This is also true. I took a look at this book and didn't see anything in it that I either didn't already know the source of or wouldn't have easily been able to find the source of if I wanted to. And if you read a bit further in the author's notes on sources, you'll see that they actually do provide their sources. They just do it in sort of a bibliography form, giving the titles of the books and collections where the primary source materials they cite can be found. They also encourage their readers to read the original writings of the people they quote. But Barton's audience just believes his claim that no footnotes mean the authors had no sources and just made things up. But I go even farther than just having the footnotes in my book. I decided to put a footnote archive on my website containing the actual images of all the documents I cite. That way people reading my book don't have to go hunting for the books and documents to read the originals. All they have to do is click on the footnotes on my website. Now, Barton acts like just listing his footnotes is enough for anyone to be able to just look them up for themselves. But of course, it's not that easy. And I say this from personal experience, having actually looked up every one of Barton's footnotes. And in addition to looking up Barton's footnotes, as well as those in the books of the other revisionists I wrote about, I needed to get quite a few documents that were only available on microfilm at the National Archives and other places. And then there were the old and hard-to-find books that I had to spend hours and sometimes days hunting down copies of. Yeah, Barton might have his library of 100,000 original documents that he's always bragging about. And I have my little collection of book pieces. I don't have money like Barton does, so when I have to buy an old or rare book, I deliberately look for a copy that's in such bad shape that no collector would want it. So I end up with books that literally arrive in several pieces, or are all beat up and covered with marks from being in a library for years and years. But I'm not trying to build a collection to brag about. I just need copies of the books. Well, anyway, because of what I had to go through to get some of these books and documents, I knew the people reading my book weren't going to have access to them. So here's how easy it is to look up my footnotes. From the homepage, you just click on the footnote archive link. That takes you to a list of all the chapter titles. Click on one of those. You get a list of all the footnotes as they appear in the book and also descriptions of the documents. And just click on the links to the images, like this one's a page from the Journals of Congress, and others are handwritten documents like this one from the Papers of the Continental Congress. And most of the links are to documents that are actually on my site, but there's a few outside links, like to the Library of Congress, Thomas Jefferson Papers, and I think the University of Virginia has the George Washington Papers, the ones that I cite in my footnotes, that collection, searchable text collection of that, so I link to that also. Pretty much whatever's easiest for people to be able to look up my footnotes as they're reading the book. On his radio show, Barton and his co-host also made some amusing assumptions about my education.
Yeah, so let's put that in timeline before we go to break and then come back to some good news. And so way I understand it, I mean, basically what you're doing, you're going back to the original source. If it happened in 1815 or in 1776, you're quoting that original source. Then somebody like this Rodda lady, she got educated in the 60s or the 70s from a textbook that had removed those things.
Yeah.
And so because her education was that it didn't exist, now she says that in 1995 or in 2000 or 2005, whichever of your books she's read, that now you've changed what she learned in the 70s, but in fact what you're doing is going all the way back to the original in 1770.
Well, contrary to the assumptions of Barton and Green, I didn't become misguided by any of those secularist textbooks. That would have been sort of impossible considering that I don't actually have any education beyond my time in a Catholic grammar school. I lasted a few months in high school and tried to take some courses at a community college at one point, but neither of those things worked out very well. My education mainly comes from lots and lots of reading and constant trips to museums, historic sites, and other educational things as a kid, which I probably learned more from than I ever would have in a classroom. I was always just particularly interested in American history and knew enough about it to be able to spot the lies of Barton and the other revisionists. So when I set out to write my book, I didn't turn to the opinions of any of the academics that these guys assume I must have been brainwashed by. I started by looking up every single one of those many, many footnotes in Barton's books, and in many cases using exactly the same original documents as he did to show how he was distorting or misquoting them. Now, I should also mention here that Barton's incessant assertion of using only original documents isn't even true. Many of the footnotes in his book Original Intent are not to original documents, but to various books from the mid-1800s and even later. For example, to support the lie that Congress printed a Bible in 1782 for the use of schools, he writes, "Of this event, one early historian observed," and then quotes this unnamed early historian saying that Congress did this. Well, if you look up Barton's footnote for that, you'll find that it's a history of the American Bible Society put out by the American Bible Society in 1849. You see, not all the lies in the current revisionist history books are new. Some have been around since the early 1800s, and many more were invented in the mid-1800s. The American Bible Society book that Barton cites was written at a time when there were major battles raging over the use of the Bible in public schools. And it's obviously pro-Bible in public schools author argued, using the same lies used today, that Congress imported Bibles in 1777 and printed Bibles in 1782 and, quote, performed all the duties of a Bible society, concluded his rant by saying it would be an outrage to be like those godless French and, quote, expel the Bible from the schools of our land. The radio show continued with Barton comparing himself to Paul in the Bible, and, well, more about all those footnotes.
Notice what happened in the Bible when they kept accusing in the book of Acts. They said, Paul, he's turned the world upside down. You go, no. The world's been upside down for so long that when he turned it right side up, you thought it was upside down.
There you go. That's a great way to put it. Yep, that's exactly what
it is. It's just going back to original stuff that everybody used to know in previous generations, but now because we no longer teach it, it sounds foreign, but that's why we do put the footnotes all out there in so many places so that people can really challenge their own education and go back to see what the truth is.
Well, the rest of the radio show segment was just a plug for Barton's book Original Intent, which his co-host claimed will change your life and your perception because it will bring all that truth to you. So I'm just going to skip that and get to a few of the many, many other lies in the Barton presentation I went to, starting with one of his most popular, that more than half the signers of the Declaration of Independence were ministers.